those youth, boys and girls, should use this, because they will get opportunities which are within 7, 8, 10 kilometers of their area.
Welcome and a very happy Republic Day to all in India and the Indian diaspora around the world. It is 7:30 in the evening in India and we are back again with a spotlight on G20. Did you know that at least 4 billion people around the world are yet to be covered by any form of social security? That is 53% of the world's population. Many of them live in G20 countries and low and middle income countries. Lack of social security makes them vulnerable to economic, social and environmental shocks. Many G20 countries are constrained to finance social security. As per a 2019 report of the International Labour Organization, an additional investment of more than $735 billion is needed by 2030 to close the financing gap globally. The first G20 Employment Working Group will meet in February in Jodhpur. On India at G20 today, we ask, can India as G20 President guide the grouping in creating sustainable financing for social security, utilizing the lessons that it has learned from its own social protection schemes? I'm Munmun Bhattacharya. Let's get started with the top stories. Republic Day greetings for India from world leaders. French President Emmanuel Macron extends his greetings, says he is looking forward to setting new ambitions together with India for the G20 and for Indo-French strategic partnership as it turns 25 this year. Indian embassies around the world celebrate India's 74th Republic Day. Indian Embassy in Beijing screens a G20 video Bharatnatyam performance and a play in Hindi at a cultural program to celebrate the occasion. In her address to the nation on the eve of India's 74th Republic Day, President Draupadi Murmu terms India's G20 presidency as an opportunity to promote democracy and multilateralism and the right forum for shaping a better world and a better future. Ambassador of India to Nepal reads out the president's message in Kathmandu. Hyderabad prepares to host a Startup 20 Inception meeting on the 28th and 29th of January. An initiative of India's presidency, Startup 20 will establish a collaborative platform across diverse sectors to complement and contribute to economic growth of G20 countries. Jodhpur will be hosting the first Employment Working Group meeting from 2nd to 4th February. So how is the city preparing for it? Here's a sneak peek into the preparations.
G20 delegates are set to congregate in Jodhpur city of the northwestern Indian state of Rajasthan for the first Employment Working Group meeting from 2nd to 4th February. Preparations for the meeting are underway at the Mehrangarh Fort, Umaid Bhavan Palace and the city's private hotels. Representatives of Indonesia and Brazil will address the inaugural session of the meeting. Union Jal Shakti Minister and Jodhpur MP Gajendra Singh Shekhawat and Union Labour and Employment Minister Bhupendra Yadav will also address the session. The second session will see deliberations on addressing global skill gaps and the final session will see addresses by delegates from participating countries on the same subject. Prominent places in Jodhpur will host the delegates.
जोधपुर में आने वाले लोगों का शहर के सभी लोग स्वागत सत्कार करें और हमारे शहर की समृद्ध उन्नत जो सेंस ऑफ हॉस्पिटैलिटी है, स्वागत अतिथि सत्कार की परंपरा है, इस सब को जो है दुनिया के सामने शोकेस कर सकते।
Special arrangements have been made in Jodhpur to welcome the delegates with Rajasthan's traditional hospitality. Delegates will start arriving in the city from 1st February. Rajasthan's heritage and culture will be showcased to the delegates from the airport itself. A farm of pearl millet or bajra and a demonstration of biscuits made from it will be shown to G20 delegates at Umaid Bhavan Palace. A live demonstration of weaving of hand-woven rugs will be done before the delegates in Salavas in Jodhpur. The delegates will get a taste of Rajasthani cuisine. The city's squares are being adorned with the colors of Rajasthan to welcome the delegates. An LED cutout of Mehrangarh Fort and a turban will also be showcased. Delegates will get to perform yoga. Over 70 mobile towers have been upgraded and new towers have been installed to enable a smooth internet experience for the G20 delegates. 30 new high-tech CCTV cameras have been set up in the city to beef up security. Preparations are thus underway in Jodhpur to make the G20 meeting a grand and productive one. With Bureau Inputs, Shyam Singh Devra's report from Jodhpur for DD India.
So 4 meetings of the Employment Working Group will be taking place this year under the Indian presidency before the Labour and Employment Ministers meeting on the 21st of July. The mandate of the Employment Working Group meeting is to address priority labour, employment and social issues for a strong, sustainable, balanced, inclusive and job-rich growth. So what are the priorities identified by India for its presidency? We tell you that next. There are 3 focus areas that India has identified under its presidency for labour and employment. The first is addressing global skill gaps. How does the government of India plan to do it? As G20 president, we'll tell you more about that later. Gig and platform economy and social protection. What exactly is gig economy and platform economy? Gig economy relies heavily on temporary and part-time positions, whereas platform economy relates to the digital jobs and the tech frameworks, etc., and the workers that are associated with that. The other focus area is sustainable financing of social security. So this is the third focus area. How is sustainable finance made available for social security schemes? So these are the 3 focus areas. Let's take them up one by one. The first is on skilling. So as far as skilling is concerned, the idea is to make a pool of skilled workforce. How exactly does the government of India, as the G20 president, propose to do that? Well, the measures to be undertaken are a workforce demand assessment. So an assessment of the workforce demand would be done across the G20 countries. This is going to be one deliverable. Skill gap mapping and opportunities for lifelong learning. So skill gaps will be mapped for opportunities for lifelong learning, which will be sought to be provided. Global initiative towards common skill taxonomies. So this is what we know about building a pool of skilled workforce. What more do we know about the first focus area? The expected outcomes are these: development of an international skill gap mapping mechanism. So an international mechanism will be made going forward that will map the skill gap. Undertaking skills demand assessment disaggregated by industries, occupations, etc. on a periodic basis. So this demand assessment will take place on a periodic basis by industry and occupations. Unified framework for skills and qualifications harmonization. What does this mean? We'll ask our guest going forward. Let's move to the fourth expected outcome: mechanism for global recognition of skills and qualifications and common skills taxonomies. So skills and qualifications need to be universally recognized, at least in the G20 countries. That's the idea behind this. Let's come to the second focus area. We've spoken about skills. Now let's focus on the gig economy and platform economy and social protection. So areas of discussion will include opportunities and challenges of platform workers. So the opportunities and challenges in front of platform workers or workers that are associated with part-time and temporary positions is going to be one imponderable. Mechanisms for comprehensive data collection of platform workers. So we need comprehensive data collection. We need data which is reliable. Also assessing effects of digitally mediated work on vulnerable working groups. So when there is digitization, what impact does it have on people in general, and what are the other challenges of digital work? That will also be an imponderable. Sharing country experiences on welfare schemes, regulations and policies that extend social protections. So what are various country experiences? This is going to be a platform to share country experiences as well. Let's move on now to the expected outcomes, bringing G20 country experiences on social protection to platform and gig workers. So this is one deliverable specifically that we are looking at insofar as the second focus area is concerned. Also enhanced national statistical capacities to capture emerging forms of work in a better way. We need the right kind of statistics for policy making. Leveraging platforms and technology for effective data collection and codification. So you need to leverage technology, you need to use data for making policies and for the implementation. Formulating policy options for social security to gig and platform workers. So policy options need to be formulated, they need to be discussed for gig and platform workers, because a whole lot of countries do not have policies to provide social protection to these gig and platform workers, which are now increasing in the countries of the G20, and hence this workforce needs to be catered to, their problems need to be addressed. Sustainable financing of social security, this is like we told you, the third focus area, social security coverage through various instruments across G20 nations. So this is going to be one imponderable. Also innovative approaches of financing social security using contributory and tax finance technologies. So what can be various forms of sustainable finance is going to be one discussion point. Best practices of countries providing expansion of social security cover to vulnerable populations. So best practices of countries that are already providing social security cover to the vulnerable population would also be discussed. The sustainable financing of social security, areas of discussion, methods to ensure long-term resilient financing and balancing it with economic growth, especially for those with limited financial capability. So there has to be a balance between fiscal health and economic growth. Also, sharing of best practices is going to be a key outcome as far as sustainable financing of social security is concerned, much like the other focus areas. What more can we expect? Recommendations on welfare entitlements that should be prioritized based on fiscal space, etc. So there will be limitations even going forward as far as fiscal space is concerned. So that also needs to be kept in mind while formulating policies. Explore availability of international development assistance and mechanisms to support social security systems. So we need to explore the possibility of ensuring finance to various sources, not just domestic. Development of policy options for financing of social security. So policy options also need to be developed for financing of social security. So these are various imponderables. Let's get perspective now from the guests joining us. Joining us are Jayant Krishna, former CEO, National Skill Development Corporation's Prime Minister, Skill India Mission. He is a former CEO, and also joining us is Dr. Shashank Goyal. He is Additional Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Employment. Do we have Mr. Goyal with us? I'll go across to Mr. Krishna first. Mr. Krishna, right. So welcome to India at G20. We've seen in detail the probable deliverables going forward. But for starters, I want to ask you that how were these three priorities identified by India in the first place, and how do they build on what past presidencies have achieved?
Yeah, so fundamentally, I believe that, I think these priorities are important, because when it comes to G20 and it comes to issues like labor, employment and skills and these kind of subjects, there's a lot of learning that, we can do from each other, I mean, if you look at on one hand, we have very, very developed countries like the US, UK, Canada, Japan, Australia, China, France, and the list is long. On the other hand, there are countries which are still developing, and they have their TVET systems, they have their skill development systems, they have their employment tracking systems, the labor market tracking systems, like countries like Brazil, Argentina, Turkey, Indonesia, India, of course, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, even Russia, I'll put in the same category, as well as South Africa. So these are the countries, they have similar problems, similar issues. The economies are not as mature as the other countries. So there's a lot that, we could learn from each other. For example, let's say Germany. Germany has an excellent way of tracking national employment data. UK has a fabulous system of tracking employment data, labor market data. India is still struggling to do that. So I think there's a lot we could learn from these countries, and including some of the developing countries like Brazil, Indonesia, they have come up with some very, very relevant skilling solutions to the problems of skills that they have in their country. So I think a lot could be learned, from that. I fundamentally believe, and also if you take it to the next level of maturity, this subject that you were discussing, it's very, very important that, how do you create more employment, because most of the countries in the G20, if you include EU, it becomes 20, otherwise 19 countries. Basically they're almost all are struggling with employment issues, and growing unemployment, So how we could leverage from each other, and other countries can also learn from India, by the way, India has come up with this PLI scheme, which has done wonders in the sense that incremental investments have come, job creation has happened. India is also, as we know, is largely a service-centric economy. Not as much a manufacturing giant as the service sector, footprint that India has. So we all know that in today's day and age, manufacturing does not create those kind of jobs. Service sector does. So India is a strong service sector economy. And therefore the employment, while on the one hand we have an employment problem, but at the same time, a lot of people have been employed, and new employment opportunities are getting created. So the rest of the world can leverage from some very successful schemes like PLI, focus on service sector. Even if you look at some of the skilling for the people at the bottom of the pyramid, which India has given free of cost, like the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. There are a whole lot of, almost 14 million people were trained in, that scheme, So I think there are a lot. In the country, we have almost 700 Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendras. There are almost 14 to 15,000 ITIs. So I think there is a very, very strong footprint we have, where skilling for people at the bottom of the pyramid, I think India has really come up with some worthwhile solutions, which rest of the G20 countries can learn, especially those which are yet not developed economies. I think they can also learn, we can also learn. So that's the purpose of a forum or a platform like G20, that we learn from each other, not be too prescriptive, but, figure out which other countries have similar issues, what kind of strategies they have deployed, and learn from each other. So I think it's a golden opportunity for India to learn from the employment, labor market tracking. You talked about gig economy. That's of course very important, because that's the largest growing sector in the employment market. So I think there's a lot India could learn from other countries, and there are things which are quite good in India. In the skill development sector, which rest of the world could leverage and learn from India.
Fair enough. I was coming to the specific deliverables. We've spoken about how there could be harmonization of various skills. What is the problem currently that a country like India faces, especially its people? They have a particular skill set, they have certificates that certify that, they have qualifications. Yet, are they recognized in other countries? If not, does the skill harmonization framework promise to address this issue?
Yeah, so I think it's very, very important. See, let us understand the difference between the developed economies in the G20 versus India. In India, in the skill development space, the issue is that India has huge numbers, and it's a very, very cost sensitive market, Whereas the developed economies like Canada, Australia, US, UK, France, most of EU, they are countries where the numbers of people to be skilled are few, but the money per person to be spent is available at hand is more, So I think this kind of dichotomy does exist, and but I think the mutual recognition of degrees as well as skill qualifications can happen. But then there has to be parity in the output, the skills quality levels also. That's very, very important. Most of the people who go from India, we hear that, let's say people who go to Middle East, even though they may have a basic skill, but they'll have to do an incremental, a delta program in that country to become employable. People going to Japan, for example, the government of India has an exchange program with Japan. Japan is an aging economy. They need a lot of people from other countries, including India. But I think, we have to have these transnational skilling standards. India has to embrace transnational skilling standards. That's very important. Once we do that, then the mutual recognition of degrees and skill qualifications would automatically happen, which is very, very important, because a lot of India's migrant labor that goes to these developed countries, including Gulf countries, they go and they land up in suboptimal jobs and things like that. So if skill them before they leave India based on standards which are transnational rather than just domestic standards, I'm sure they'll the kind of money, that kind of life or dignity that they will lead in these countries would be far superior.
Okay, let's get a perspective from the Labour Ministry now. I'm going across to Dr. Goyal, who's joining us on the phone line. Dr. Goyal, the second and the third priority areas are relating to how social security needs to be extended to gig and platform workers and how there should be sustainable financing that needs to be ensured, because several countries are short on finance, and which is why they have not made policies, haven't gone ahead to cover the gig and platform workers, particularly in the social security realm. So, right. So, I am coming to you, Dr. Goyal, on the second focus area first, which is how do you provide social security to gig and platform workers through G20? What is the deliverable and how exactly will it be executed?
This gig and platform economy is a very new form of employment which has been expanding, and it has the potential to provide significant income generating opportunities for our workers, especially for women, persons with disabilities, and also old age people. And it provides advantages to workers to complement their existing incomes, work from home, and exercise job flexibility. A lot of advantages are there for the workers and even businesses and customers because of this new form of work. But this area has certain disadvantages, like there is no sustainable and security of income. There are gaps in social security coverage, and they don't have access to collective bargaining, and the terms of contract are also a disadvantage to these workers at times. So what we have proposed, that this is an important area which the G20 countries in the employment working group, they should discuss, and they should also collectively work towards how to deliberate on issues like better data collection and on platform work, and also share experiences on welfare schemes and regulations in these countries and policies to extend social protection to these workers. So what we are expecting in our deliberations is that we will be able to, we will get recommendations on how to formulate series of recommendations on how to extend social protection coverage to these workers and in the platform and gig economy. And we are also expecting some guidance amongst the countries on how national statistical capacities and methodologies can be enhanced to better capture emerging forms of work, including the gig and platform work. And
so, Dr. Goyal, if I can come in now, I wanted to ask you whether India has identified some of the best practices in some countries of the G20, particularly which provide social security coverage to gig and platform workers, which could come up for discussion and which could perhaps be shared on the G20 platform and incorporated in other countries.
Yeah, in fact, India has done a new labor codes have been created, and in our code on social security, for the first time, India has defined what a gig and platform worker would be. And we have also put in place in our social security code a system in which social welfare fund, social security fund for the gig and platform workers would be created at the national level, in which there will be contributions from the workers, from the platform employers, and also from the government, in which social security schemes would be provided to these gig and platform workers.
Right.
So
what is the status of that? Right. What is the status of implementation, sir, of that initiative, and what is the timeline of implementation that we are looking at? Broadly speaking.
Well, now we are in the process of finalizing our the social security codes, and the rules under them. And once we are able to finalize the rules, because in certain areas state governments also have to frame the rules. Once we are able to do that, then all these provisions for providing social security coverage to the gig and platform workers will come into force.
Right, and very quickly, how do you ensure financing for that? Because sustainable financing options would also be looked at.
Yeah, sustainable financing for the social security schemes is very important, because the social security schemes, they provide income security and effective access to health and other social services to the workers, especially to the vulnerable groups, workers in the unorganized economy and to migrants. So this is and the sustainable financing has been a very contentious issue, because there are different forms in which financing can be done. It can be done by contribution by workers, contribution by the employers, and financing by government through tax revenues. So a lot of options are available, and we want to use this opportunity to share the best practices of sustainable financing mechanisms for providing universal social security coverage, because India has an elaborate system of social security, even though still gaps are there, but we can learn from the experiences of the other countries and also share our experience to them.
Okay.
We also want to develop some recommendations on prioritizing the welfare elements based on the fiscal space, because sometimes it may not be we are not able to provide all the social security schemes to the workers, but what schemes should be taken on priority, we can discuss. And we can also discuss on development of policy options, including social insurance schemes, tax finance schemes, and a mix of both schemes to ensure sustainable financing of our for workers for their social security.
Okay.
So I think India has a lot of experiences to offer on this front of financing social security, even though still gaps are there. And we can also learn from the experiences of others, and then G20 countries can come to a common understanding on how to prioritize the welfare schemes for the workers, and how to provide a mix of different options, policy options for financing them.
We'll leave it at that. Dr. Goyal, thank you so much for joining us with your views, and Mr. Krishna, thanks a lot for joining us. So 4 billion people around the world do not have social security cover currently, and as per the ILO, well over $735 billion is required to meet that financing gap globally. And with that, we'll say goodbye to you. And the G20 logo made with garlands and flower petals in India's national capital on the occasion of India's 74th Independence Day. That's the image of the day, a defining image in what promises to be a defining year for India as the G20 president. Thanks for watching.
The changing world of news. Headlines that you wake up to. News that shapes your day. Stories that matter to you. The latest and most accurate updates. A fresh start to a new day. The Breakfast News, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. on DD India.
ये विशाल है ना, इसका सब प्रॉपर चलता है।
कल उसके बैंक अकाउंट में 15,000 रुपए का फ्रॉड हुआ है, पता है?
इसको तो कोई टेंशन ही नहीं होती है, देखना।
टेंशन क्यों? मेरी कोई गलती नहीं थी। फिर भी फ्रॉड होने पर मैंने तुरंत बैंक को इन्फॉर्म कर दिया। आरबीआई कहता है अगर आपके अकाउंट से किसी ने धोखे से पैसे निकाले हैं तो बैंक को जल्द से जल्द इन्फॉर्म कीजिए। 3 दिन के अंदर इन्फॉर्म किया तो कोई नुकसान नहीं होगा। जितना लेट करोगे उतना ज्यादा नुकसान। और सुन, सब चलता नहीं है, प्रॉपर चलाना पड़ता है। आरबीआई कहता है जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।